Can a DLC win the Game of the Year? This was a bit of a controversial question to ask last year, when the DLC of Elden Ring, Shadow of the Eld-Tree, was nominated for the highest award of them all. But while many were busy addressing the question if an expansion of a game should or should not be nominated among other masterpieces for the GOTY, the question how a DLC should be reviewed was not often asked. In my opinion, answering this latter question is crucial to answer the former one, since it determines the difference between evaluating the DLC proper and the game itself. In other words, how much of the expansion is reviewed independently from the game it is an expansion of? Is it possible to separate the two? First things first, roll the intro. One year ago, I reviewed the infamous game Duke Nukem Forever, a title that was greatly despised by the general public when it was released, but that I somewhat enjoyed. Though far from being a masterpiece, I was having fun playing the game, so much so that for the low price of €1, I decided to buy the expansion The Doctor Who Cloned Me and play that one as well. In my opinion, the expansion of the game is well made. It addresses some problems the base title has, and it explores some creative new ideas that work well by themselves. It has its flaws and it is somewhat brief, but considering the launch price of $10, I think that Doctor Who Cloned Me is a fine addition, and the general public seems to agree that it is better than the base game itself. But how do you review this expansion pack? Sure, the extra content is an improvement, but an improvement to the universally hated Duke Nukem Forever, a game that has a 46 on Metacritic for a reason. So does the expansion get a failing grade despite its praises? And what if the conditions are inverted, a bad DLC for an outstanding game? I think it is no secret that The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is one of, if not my favorite games of all time. I love this title, and I'm surely not the only one, considering the game was praised by millions of players all across the world. The one thing I did not enjoy much about it, however, is the expansion it got, specifically the Champion's Ballad. For a game that offers a level of creativity never seen before, a freedom that to this day marks the basis of modern game design, I feel that the expansion doesn't truly expand on anything. The DLC just inserts some more shrines and recycles the same bosses facing the main plot, bosses that already weren't the most beloved from the Zelda franchise. Sure, it adds some lore and the motorbike, but considering this is the Breath of the Wild, it was a bit underwhelming. Despite my disappointment, I still got to play more Breath of the Wild, something that despite it all is still something that I do enjoy, and the Champion's Ballad allowed me to do just that. So, does any DLC for a good game get a passing grade despite its shortcomings? It is the same question as before, but inverted. You now understand my dilemma. It is challenging to evaluate an expansion without weighing the quality of the original game. You cannot dismiss a DLC because the original game is bad, nor promote any DLC made to a good game for the same reason. So, what to do? We have to take a step back. In my opinion, when reviewing an add-on, we must contextualize it in whatever game it's in, by not addressing mechanics present in the original game. It makes no sense to evaluate again how the game plays and feels in a DLC review, since that was already done in the review of the game at launch. For instance, why would I address the core gameplay mechanics of Mario Kart 8 if I'm reviewing the Booster Course Pack? As a reviewer, I must assume someone already has their own opinion on the game, and are watching or reading my 2 cents on the additional courses specifically, both on their design as well as graphical quality. If anything, I would be a bit critical with the specific expansion despite loving Mario Kart 8. Sure, it adds an extraordinary amount of tracks for a very reasonable price, but some tracks, especially in the first couple of waves, are poorer in quality than the base game. In a proper review, I would focus my attention on what is added rather than what is already in it. And actually, this does bring me to my main point. Downloadable content has to be reviewed in a fundamentally different way than a standard game. Most games can be reviewed on a plot, gameplay, graphics arrangement, but every DLC review has to be unique. It has to address solely on what such DLC is adding to the base game. For instance, Half-Life 2's Episodes 1 and 2 have the scope of increasing the plotline and adding some extra playable missions to the single-player campaign. I will not address the revolutionary physics the engine of the game has, nor the graphical compartment, since these 2 elements are not touched upon in either episode, neither for the best nor for the worse. For the many Hearts of Iron 4 DLCs, I would basically do the opposite. For each DLC, I would only take in consideration how the new focus tree and mechanics affect the gameplay of the selected nations, comparing them before and after. In strategy games, not every addition is balanced, hence only a well-done expansion can both increase the quantity of variables without breaking the game. In other words, it is purely the quality of the content that matters. Point being, each addition made to a game requires a specific way to be crafted, and every different shape a DLC has hardly ever fits in other contexts, in other games. How do you even compare additional maps in a multiplayer game like Easy Red 2 to new cosmetics in Rocket League? That is why I'm against the idea of nominating DLCs for various non-DLC related awards, because it is by definition impossible to compare an add-on with a proper standalone game. Sure, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt's expansion of Blood and Wine is outstanding, no doubts about that, but it is built over an already awarded game, with various mechanics that were already judged by the public. I adore Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon, have played it from start to finish at least 4 times, but I adore it specifically because it's built over Far Cry 3, with some neon textures but the same core gameplay. I cannot tell you that Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon is better or worse than Bioshock Infinite without first addressing the core gameplay borrowed from another game. There are amazing expansions out there that deserve all the love in the world, but they are expansions, different from newly released games. You might enjoy the expansion of your beloved game more than a different release title, but to compare them and award one over the other is irrational. It's like comparing apples to oranges. I already believe game reviews should avoid using numerical grades, and DLCs are no different. If anything, they should be avoided more specifically because they depend on another review. What do they even do? Add points? Detract them? But going back to the main course, what other considerations must be made when reviewing a DLC? One important element that also needs to be taken account for is the smaller scope expansions usually have in the gaming world. By definition, even the biggest expansion there is built over an already existing game, meaning there is less to discuss. While in a game review the aspects of what makes a game great might be endless, the characteristics of an add-on are fewer, thus might require a briefer and straight-to-the-point judgment. I do not wish to generalize here, but most DLC reviews can be summarized in "this DLC adds the following elements to the game," and from there it is up to the viewer to scale if these additions are good enough for them. It is a bit pointless to state if you like the game you should buy this expansion, because this and the opposite statement are self-fulfilling. If you did not enjoy Duke Nukem Forever and believe this game to be a colossal flop, the Doctor Who Clone Me is not going to change your mind. If you love Breath of the Wild, of course I suggest you to play the Champion's Ballad, simply because it is more Zelda. Here we face once again the problem of distinguishing the review of the DLC and the review of the original game. Players don't want to be told again what they already know about a given title, but rather what the expansion does to, well, expand it. I believe that a review made to a downloadable content should start from where the original game review left, addressing how the trajectory of such a content either improves or hurts the original product, if such expansion is worth it to the listener or not based on the judgment already made to the base game. Think of a DLC review like a PS on a letter. The function of the postscriptum is not to replace the whole text above it, but as a way to address a specific aspect to what was already consolidated in the text. In other words, you can write a PS without first writing the original letter. An isolated review of Civilization V's Brave New World, for instance, has no meaning if it does not link back to an analysis made to Civ 5. With this video, I don't want to give expansions a bad rep, to consider them as afterthoughts that don't deserve the same care for detail as full titles. If anything, to respect the unique role expansions play in the gaming world, it is important to review them in precise ways, methods that reflect the role they play in improving games we love. When well made, the expansion does not need to revolutionize gaming, nor compete with standalone titles, but rather enhance what we as gamers already cherish, or alternatively to address and improve problems in negative experiences. To ask the question what is worse, a bad DLC for a good game or a good DLC for a bad game is to ask the wrong question. A good expansion needs to be credited no matter the original game, and a bad expansion needs to be criticized for its shortcomings, but it's up to the user to decide if an expensive DLC for their favorite games is worth it, or if they desire to give a game they disliked a second chance. Don't judge expansions like they are games, but rather judge if they are fine additions tuned specifically to the games they're expanding. To review an expansion is quite challenging, since it takes quite a precision and care not to review the base game again, and only focus on what the additional content has to offer. As you might have guessed by now, I try to avoid reviewing DLCs for this very reason, and since the content is shorter to begin with, they wouldn't make for longer discussions. Still, there are many expansions that do deserve credit, and I invite you to play them because they are well made, despite the game they're in. If you made it this far, I wanted to thank you one too many DLC stands for watching today's video. I think at this point I've made more videos discussing how to review games rather than, well, reviews. Perhaps I should apply more of my ideas into practice. Still, what is your take on expansions and their nominations to the Game Awards? I wish you all a wonderful day, and until next time, arrivederci!